it better?
Yeah.
Honestly.
I have American internet, and you have exactly the internet I'd expect Mexico to have.
It's really not that bad here, but what Brandon and I noticed is that when you go back to the States after being here for a while, you're like, there's less shit smell in the air in the US than there is in Mexico.
I grew accustomed to it.
Kind of, yeah. Because we're both kind of, we call it fresa, which is like a fancy way of saying prissy, or like a Spanish way of saying prissy, because we like it to be nice. And we both have nice places, but like you have to watch when you're walking around. When I went to Cuba, it's like very beautiful, but it's all falling apart. And if you don't watch where you're walking, you could fall into a hole that would literally kill you. Here, it's similarly majestic, and there's no fall in a hole and die, but there is trip on something that would either send you to the hospital or leave you with a scar for the rest of your life. And I did that. I was hustling to the ATM, and there was like an 8-inch metal rod out the ground, and I put my leg right into it, and I now have a scar. And for months, people would be like, did that just happen? I was like, actually, it happened 3 months ago. It's just really, really bad. And it didn't cause me a lot of pain, but like I'll have a scar for the rest of my life. Thanks, Mexico.
It's actually a difference between California and Texas that I noticed too, is that California, for its problems, like just the way things were run, the infrastructure down to the minutia was like there's a lot more attention. If a street needed to be repaired in California, there's bureaucracies and things to get through. 3 months later, it gets done, and it gets done really well. And here, like, they just notice it and they do it in 3 days, and they just block off the road, and it's just dog shit done, but they do it immediately.
That's interesting. In Montreal, there's a whole like a mafia, and I don't know, the Quebecer mafia. But like they run all that. So you'll go to Montreal, and it doesn't matter the time of year. They'll block off whole sections of the city because like they're juicing the city for like these like juicy contracts or whatever. And there was a time like I went to get some weed off a friend. It was like a friend of a friend in 2016. And Montreal is an island like Manhattan. And so sometimes you have to go off the island. And I'm leaving the island of the Ile de Montreal. And I went to this girl. He's like a, I don't know, interesting white girl that was friends with Genevieve, the first French Canadian. And then we were hanging out over there. And as I was coming back, the Uber driver was like, oh, you're really lucky because they just closed the one bridge to get you into the island. I was like, well, how does that work? How do you just close the whole island? That seems crazy.
It's just happening.
Yeah, but it's the opposite. So I get that Texas is like that. They have gumption and fortitude and Hank Hill. Here, nothing ever gets done. Remember, we used to joke about how Grandpa would fix certain things in his house, and it was all Mickey Mouse and slapped on and wires everywhere. Yeah. So it turns out he's not like retarded or lazy. I mean, he might have been, but really, it's just part of the culture here. Yeah. And there are these, you'll go walking down the street and there are these just loose wires hanging, and you're like, well, is there power, or what kind of wires are it? Will I die? Is this going to hurt me? Or is it just, we just accept that there are loose wires hanging? I don't know.
All right. So may I presume it's not a litigious, sue-happy society, like that thing of where a mistake is made and you will be compensated monetarily through an infinite amount of high-powered attorneys.
So that is a uniquely American thing, and I have to watch that because I've gotten myself in hot water where the slightest transgression, and I have a friend who says this is quintessentially American, that at some point in time we say, unacceptable, this is unacceptable. And that's very, very American to say, no, it's not like that here. And I'm sure that if you died or maimed or end up in the hospital, anything's possible. But even like a car accident, I love this about Mexico. So China is like this too. You'll have an accident, it's a big city. It's a crazy city. Like you've lived in LA, any amount of LA insanity on the roads that you might see is way worse here. And the worst part about it is the cops don't ever enforce vehicle code. So there's no like speeding tickets or, illegal U-turn, any of that shit. It's just whatever goes. And so like if you have an accident, which it's a big city, shit happens, people will pull off to the side of the road and they'll kind of look at it and scratch their head. And like there'll be this half-ass attempt to be made to like foist out the fucking dent or like buff with like a shirt. Yeah. And then somebody be like, okay, it's not that bad. And then they'll just kind of leave. And it's not at all American like that.
Yeah. So at the gym recently had a dude, I want to say he was from Switzerland or somewhere in that general area, came to Squatch, and he was asking about the liability waiver that he had to sign. He's like, if you hurt yourself here, it's just saying that it's your responsibility. You accept that it's dangerous and you move on. He's like, that's something I noticed very funny about here is that where I'm from, if you do something stupid and you make a mistake, people are like, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. You got hurt? That's what happens when you do dumb shit. Fuck, do I miss that?
Sometimes terrible things happen and we can't really solve them. See, I'm in the post-litigation phase of it all because like I have become financially successful and then that success has receded significantly where in the past I would very much be on my unacceptable tip and rush to the aid of legal counsel. And sometimes it's worked and sometimes it's not. The times that it has worked, we've gotten some money, and the times where it hasn't, I've had a shitstorm that I started explode in my face and I've been asked to pay legal fees, which are very, very expensive. And suddenly I'm like, well, maybe we don't want to do an attorney thing now. And maybe either we let it go or at some point in time in the future, just find ourselves some good old fashioned street justice and do something terrible.
Better example. Dogs. I had my big dog seminar conversation today. Dog in the house bites the kid in the house. It's like, we have to throw the dog away. I can't believe it would bite the kid.
Dog is canceled.
Dog is canceled. When we were kids, you go up to the dog while he's eating. Dog bites the shit out of you. Dad comes up alongside you and goes, smacks the kid upside the head. Like, how the fuck many times do I tell you not to bother the dog while he's eating? Now you got a bitten face. Your dad backhanded you. You learned a lesson. You're like, I guess I don't go pester the carnivorous predator that lives in our house while he's eating the only sustenance that's available to him. We make these decisions that are foolish, and we're like, somebody should pay me for that. There's times when that's the case. There's times you need to shut the fuck up and act right.
What you're describing is very one-to-one, right? It's like a thing happened and this was the result. At least in the digital world, in my world, it's so many shades of gray. And even more so, there's something called the Communications Decency Act from like 1996. And there's Section 230, which gets a lot of play, whereby anybody that posts anything on the internet, the internet provider or the network, so like Facebook or Instagram or whoever's like Starlink or whatever, whoever's providing your internet experience is not specifically not held liable. So there's two things that happen. One thing is the internet grows because there's user-generated content or all these things are happening. Wow, it's so great. Section 230 saved the internet because everybody sues everybody and everybody's a cunt about every little thing, right? But then over time, a pattern will emerge and there are these huge sections. One's called community guidelines violations reporting and the other one is DMCA reporting. And people will violate somebody in a straightforward way and they'll be like, okay, no, we have a rule that says you can't, have a jihad content on the internet, and so you do a community guidelines takedown, or somebody uses somebody else's content and there's a legitimate takedown of that. Sure. But then the other side of it is that I don't like person XYZ and I'm going to file community guidelines reporting against them just to kind of be a twat. And so the rules that were set up to protect it now get abused and gamed, and all kind of horrible shit comes out of that. You want to talk about an ethical thicket or a morass? Yeah. I've been fighting against this for basically ever since a certain model whose name I won't mention quit the company and decided to do all of that shit. And so then you start to look, well, will attorneys help me? Probably not. Will law enforcement help me? Probably not. I'm suddenly very much interested, even though I might not do it myself, in good old-fashioned street justice.
Yeah, but like that whatever rules are put in place, we will game the edges of the system to our benefit. That's something I've always loved, if I can say it without the whole world ruining my life, about Trump. That like you find the edges of what the rules are and then let morals and ethics play no role in that and just ride through his lawyers the edge of what is legally being allowed to do. And granted, I'm sure he does a lot of illegal shit too, but riding the edge of what is legal and relying on his lawyers to be like, well, I did it. But is it right to do? Who fucking cares? I can, and I did. I found the edge of what was okay, and I lived there forever, and then I extracted something out of it.
Kind of, and I have to watch myself on that because, like, I'm not like a multimillionaire or anything. I can't have my way, vis-a-vis attorneys. If we try not to do this, if we ever get in a battle with the models, we try not to sue them because the girls all talk to each other, and it's easy to demonize the one heterosexual male in the equation. But if there are other people that you start a fight with or get in a dispute with, let's say, and they have a lot more firepower, like one of our competitors, they can ruin your life presumably forever. And then suddenly I'm like the bad guy, or I'm on the run because of that. And the line for that is live by the blade, die by the blade.
Yeah.
If you start a fight, you best be able to finish it. And if you can't, good luck to you.
I get it being like willing to sue and happy to throw down a legal boundary wherever it may play, but then it starts to become vengeful and back and forth and like if you do this, then I'm going to do this, and it becomes this very aggressive back and forth that like I don't have the sturdiness of constitution to deal with that kind of back and forth, which seems like it's right up your alley.
Is that a Switzerland LSD bike related t-shirt?
That's Bicycle Day. That's Hoffman, 1943, the day that he fucking took some subdermal unintentional acid into his system.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So do you use Spotify?
Yeah.
Okay, so Spotify Wrapped came out, and I went through it all. And the new thing that they offer this year is that they show a geolocation of where your taste, for people who are like your taste, go to. And I always talk trash about startup culture because like techie people are all like, you know, polyamorous and dress weird and go to Burning Man. And I love their drugs, but like their music is weird and their taste is bad. And they usually are like somewhere on the either autism spectrum or there's weirdness on the sexuality identity spectrum. They're just weird. And a lot of my friends are in that culture, and I love them because they're smart and interesting and very often ambitious, but the culture is just weird. That's why I don't go to Burning Man, even though I love their drugs. So when the Spotify Rap came out, they're like, people like you usually live in Berkeley, California. I was like, I'll allow it. I was like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
That Bicycle Day is huge. They start at the Gold Gate Bridge and they go all over and everybody's frying acid and it's great. I would love to go to that. I'm not huge on Burning Man, even though like certain friends of mine like revere the experience. But like that's like the one thing I would go to because like I love riding a bike on LSD. It's a phenomenal experience.
Yeah. My first experience riding a bike on psychedelics was on 4th of July with mushrooms, and it's like you forget that you're taking some mushrooms for a 20-minute fireworks display and you just signed on to a 4-hour experience. So we started early enough to be peaking at the fireworks display and we're like, this is cool. And now an entire city of drunken, maniacal, overly congested people are getting in their cars, and we rode our bikes there and we're like, I guess we'll ride our bikes through this 10 miles home. But like I found it was very scary, and mushrooms can make you feel stuck. But this was like, I felt like I could see the future and I could feel the lane changes, and I got like so in tune with the traffic itself. Like I felt like I was one step ahead of anything. And once you get past the resistance of feeling stuck or incapable, is you put yourself in that new environment and like, oh no, this is what I do now. Just moving through traffic beautifully and serenely. That's what I do now. And then you're very much able to do physical things on that, even if it feels like you can't. Like you lock into the movement of things, and it was delightful.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why I like psychedelics, and that although there are a range of substances that we can either enjoy or abuse, whatever, that psychedelics I always kind of come back to the point where if I don't do that once in a while, I get way too in my head because I've always been very heady, and I can be kind of nasty because I take Concerta a couple of times a week, and I can get kind of mean, kind of like people on Adderall do. Like, no, it's a great laughing joy and a connectedness of all of it, and find your inner hippie, you fucking asshole. And if you are, that's kind of the experience. Having, you know, like to reconnect with somebody who also is very brainy and is kind of cut off, like Heather Knight, my wonderful friend for many, many years. So smart and so creative and so capable and beautiful and just a unique person in so many ways, still will kind of get in her head and kind of be cut off. But she came down here to Mexico City in January or February of this year, and we went to Chapultepec Park, which is like huge, and there's this castle, and we both had a little bit of an exotic substance, and I was like, oh, this is what it's all about. And like, so we went from both kind of cagey and cut off and whatever to we went through the whole castle, which is amazing, and it's the only European castle in all of North America. And eventually we're like sitting on the grass, like having some kind of like fruit juice beverage thing that we bought off of some like tienda, like out on the street. And this like really aggressive Mexico City squirrel, which are like kind of small and scrappy like LA squirrels, but they're kind of dark. It's just a local squirrel thing. It was like all up on us and like trying to get our like fruit beverage. And I was like, well, this kind of fits because like you're connected to nature to the point where even the animals know that like you're just kind of another animal. And I was like, as much as it was weird and the squirrel was very aggressive, I was like, no, this is a natural experience. This is exactly what we needed, because like otherwise we're just trying to like, I don't know, be humans and control everything. Sometimes you have to let loose is the point.
Yeah. Just last night I was talking about the exact same thing, feeling the need to take a step out of the heady version of always moving forward and always accomplishing things and maximizing the day and optimizing everything, and take a second and just be, but not in the way that is also thinking about what else should be done, but that presence that's way more expansive, and you can just do that big fucking that big sigh that lets out, and you look around at all of it and you're like, yeah, I get it. I've been a little caught up in the day to day.
Sure. So for me, I always find that like the way I act in any social situation is kind of like informed by the person that I'm connected to. So like with some people, I can be like mean or stubborn or a little thick-headed or whatever, but then other people who are kind of like free, kind of like how we managed to stay being open-minded and free into, in our early 40s, it's kind of rare and great. So there's this girl, Ailish, that I met when I went to Bermuda, and she's an English girl from Essex and then later moved to Australia. She just randomly texted me out of the blue, and we were like texting at like 7 o'clock in the morning because I was up late. And she's so kind of funny and witty and a gas, and the way our banter is great. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that part of me is just like Ailish, like this like witty kind of English girl who's like funny and also kind of like saved herself from being like this like, dead inside corporate slave. And we need that. We need certain people to like wake us up. There's a famous John Updike quote that there are chords within us that someone else must strike. And that's why you and I come back to this. And that's why there are certain people in my life I'm like, no, I need kind of this person around, because like they remind me of who I often am, even if I forget.
Yeah. So one of the dudes that I hang out with a lot, also from California, came out here for similar reasons, or just felt like a turmoil in California that just couldn't be tolerated. And the one thing that we relate on more than anything is just comedy. And so we get in his car many evenings per week. We call it the Icy Boy. And in the Icy Boy, anything goes. And so as far as language is concerned, that like to be willing to say the most horrible things at any given time for the sake of a laugh, it's a nice reminder of not taking things too seriously, and just like a place that's almost specifically for comedy that we get in there, and it's just riffing the entire time and stupid impersonations and all of that, because we're both in the middle of a transformation that's so early on in it. It's easy to feel thick and muddy and stuck and just caught in the chili molasses of it all, than to get in a place where you remove all potential filters, even to the point where you shock yourself or each other by saying something so horrible that you're like, wow, that felt a little bit dangerous. And I don't really think that way about anything, but to be willing to just say anything about anybody and any group anytime just for the sake of a laugh is way more refreshing than I would have thought.
Sure. And so people have talked about how this is not a great time to be a comedian because like, everybody is very like bristles at every little thing and everybody's very sensitive. There's this new kind of like identity politics that it's kind of forming itself, and it's not fully articulated. You don't really know when you step on toes until like next thing you know, you're canceled. People talk about how that this is a bad time for comedy, but I disagree. I think this is probably the best time for comedy, because like you can still kind of do anything. You just have to learn the new rules. And so while if you do things the old way, yes, there is the very high likelihood of stepping on people's toes or offending somebody. There's also a great time to like invent what's new, because like if they're inventing their identity in the future, they don't really know who they are. Well, guess what? Comedians are always in a state of upheaval. They're always in a state of creation. They're always in a state of revolution. So like you could make really wholesome jokes. And so there are these great TikTok comedians that are like not even really intentionally funny. There's this Icelandic guy who's really popular right now. And he's just like has this like witticisms about living in Iceland and his wife and his kid and his dog. And I was like, this comedy can be this. So as much as, if you do things the old way and you're like, white people always be like, or black people always be like, or Jewish people, I'm like, no, that feels dated and kind of 90s, 80s style. It's like Jerry Seinfeld. Not that he's anything wrong with him because he's hilarious, but like, no, that's kind of like observational. And you can do more situational things that are like kind of unexpected. And this Icelandic guy is great. And it's all new comedy. It's almost like cult of personality funny. You're just like, wow, this weird Icelander, this is just how they think there. And it's more like how he says things than anything. And I was like, no, this is a great time, because you wouldn't even have been able to do anything like this. It would have fallen flat because it's just too weird. That's maybe what will come out of you and I is our ability to just like, well, you might have some one-liners and I might have some one-liners, but together it's comic gold, baby. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, the Austin scene right now is undoubtedly the comedy hub of probably the world right now, as far as how many different kinds of people, different styles of comedy. And I went to a show the other night that had probably 8 comics, and like each person couldn't have been more different in their style and their delivery and their appearance. Certainly men and women of infinite variety. And the only thing that matters is that we're all just fishing for a laugh. And it was astonishing how different everyone, it almost took like a pivot in how you think, and a couple minutes of each person being almost a little unsettling because they're switching so much. But it takes a couple minutes to find that momentum right after somebody really found their stride in a very different way. And then that next person starting, you're like, I'm watching 5-minute movies of a bunch of different genres all in a row. Yeah, and it was wild. What does David Sedaris say? My cheeks were sore with forced merriment, but it wasn't forced. It was legitimate. By the end, I'm like, I have a headache from being in a constant state of laughing, and my brain is a little tortured from having to think about that many different ways to be awful. It was wonderful.
So that's kind of the point of comedy or any kind of entertainment. David Foster Wallace talked a lot about how your point as a writer, as any kind of creator really, is to wake up your audience and to remind them of how smart they are.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean the biggest words. He was big on big words and, kind of wanking, if you will, about how smart he was. But some of his best stuff was just funny and Infinite Jest. It's like the postmodern novel is written in the 90s and it found new legs after he killed himself, is like that too, where you're like, yeah, he's really smart and probably read the Oxford English Dictionary, but it's really when he's funny. And when he's funny, he could be talking about like crackheads drinking like scissor on the street, or like he could be talking about like kids playing tennis. It can be about anything. And that's kind of, Jerry Seinfeld talked about this too. He talked about how like when we were kids, everybody was funny. And then we all kind of just like got jobs and stopped being funny and had a family and a mortgage and all this stuff. And the point is to like hold on to your humanity as long as you can. That's what I always want anything to be. If we're watching a thing, or if we're reading a thing, or if we're any kind of media or content or anything, even if it's like sexy or dramatic or whatever, underlying any of it should kind of be funny. And if it's funny, then it's genius. And if it's not, well, then you're like, well, it was this and that. And there's all these like explanations or critiques, or you can pick it all apart and you'd be like, well, it's reminded me of this and of that. But if it's good, it's just funny. That's it. And it's like Asteroid City, that one I wanted you to watch. Did you ever watch that? Okay, so it's a Wes Anderson film. It's his most recent one. It's got an amazing cast and it's very well produced. It's typical Wes Anderson stuff. I was reading this like New York Times critique of it, and the critique was like, oh, Wes Anderson doesn't care about reality. He doesn't care about this. And I was like, yeah. And then like I read the genre and it said romance, drama. I was like, you didn't get it. I don't care if you write for the New York Times. You thought it was a romance and a drama and he doesn't care about reality. It was fucking hilarious. And if you don't understand why it was hilarious, maybe don't talk about it or write about it or even go to see it. Cause like, or maybe you can't help but go to see it, but like, otherwise it's an uninformed opinion. But like, it's if it's funny, you just laugh. You don't need to have a critique or a breakdown or any of it. It's funny. You laugh. That's it. Come on. It's really simple. It's like running a marathon. It's just you and the road. It's just you and the comedian. You're either laughing or you're not. You're either exercising or you're engaged in the thing or you're not. And people, I think very often, although there are principles, they get lost in once again, the morass of it all, because it's like, oh, it's so intellectual. Like, no, it's either funny or it's not. It's either great or it fell flat. You either did a good job or you kind of failed and need to think it through again. But it doesn't have to be a brainy experience. It's really just like 0 or 1. You're either on or you're off, and that's it.
So I have these ideas and these jokes and these things that I've written that as soon as I see a comedian touch on a subject close enough to it, it's one of those moments where you feel like you missed your chance for you to put this thing out here. And of course, many people are thinking these things because it's just out there. And if your finger's on the pulse of the culture, then 0 chance you're the only person thinking it, etc. So at In-N-Out Burger, there's this jar for the abused children. We were there the other day and I was paying in cash and my change was like 14 cents. 31 cents is what it was. And they're like, do you want to donate to the abused children for that? I'm like, I can see that the thing has maybe 3% full. I can just see that it's just light on the donations. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to donate 31 cents to this, like, can I get an itemized printout on the amount of abuse that was saved? Like, because if I donated $5, it's like I could see a drunken father not hitting his kid for $5. If like I'm paying for that, then I'll get it. But like if I'm donating 31 cents, like does he raises his hand and he comes down with it and he's like 31 cents, I will scare him. Or maybe I'll slap him. But like I'd like a printout on what my quarter does. Like I'd like to see, what do I get for a quarter? Why would I want to do 50 cents? Like can we berate the child for 2 minutes instead of 5? Like where are my dollars really pitching in here? Like I'd like to know. I'd like to know.
That's hilarious.
I'd like to pay for an open hand instead of a closed fist. Like, I'll take it.
That's like a variation of a Mitch Hedberg old joke about, I don't need a receipt for a donut. I give you money, you give me donut. End of transaction. It's like flipping that around.
Yeah.
Good comedy is like either you're stating the obvious or you're understating what's obvious. Those are two simple rules I always find. And like you're stating the obvious is genius because like they will ask all the time, even here for donations. Donar, right? Same thing. I'm like, what does it do, right? I don't know where this is going. And if you really pick it, to me, I'm just like, I can't be bothered with it. For you, you're like, oh no, let's get right into this.
Yeah.
What exactly is happening here with this money? I'm thrilled.
Yeah, I got more than just the coins that came back to me, man. Like I got a pocket full of cash and I'm ready to let it ride.
You're at the strip club, but you're at the foster home and you're just like, making it rain to see what you can get.
Yeah, like for a 20, will there be one of these formerly abused children that's waiting for me outside the door and I can take them to an amusement park? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, you can hang out. He could tell you a story or share with you how the money was spent to like make him feel better, or honestly, probably make you feel better.
I was hoping for a printout of the statistics of fistfuls of coins to save children. Like, I want to know dollars to donuts. Like, I want to see how many coins equal saved children. I want to get that fucking percentage up. Yeah, I'd like to see that. I want to know, where's my money going?
Obviously, you're kidding, but like I think a lot of it is just like how people want to feel better about themselves. It has really nothing to do with any of that. It has to do more with the person donating, than it does to anything. Jeff Bezos' wife, ex-wife, whatever, Mackenzie, whatever, who inherited billions of dollars and is like, I'm a simple person and don't need this. I'm going to give away billions of dollars. So I think it was last year she gave it all away. I kind of don't think she got that itemized receipt either, and she spent billions of dollars. So don't feel bad.
Yeah. She made 20 people who founded a foundation billionaires, and they're like, I'll take it from here, and they're just like, that was way easier than I expected.
Totally. It's like, well, the administration is well provided for you. Thank you, Mrs. X Bezos. That's great.
Yeah. And so in the end, after all the jokes about the Save Children and the nickel, like, I don't know, like maybe they just spit on the kid for the nickel. But in the end, I was like, maybe this is just like a side hustle tip jar for the people that are on staff right now. Like at the end of the night, they divide it up and they're like, we're the abused children. We all made an extra $3 tonight. Thank you for your donations.
I don't even think that's that bad. I think that everybody should have a tip jar, except for like the robots at the supermarket. That's ridiculous. Yeah. Although there are companies trying to get away with that. Yeah. But like, of course you should have a tip. I tip everywhere here because Mexico is like, best case scenario, you're paying like 50% of what you would pay in the States, even in like a flyover state like Oklahoma. Everything is like half. And so I always say, if we're paying in pesos, we're tipping in dollars. I'm sorry. And we have a friend of ours who's like, no, if you tip too much, you cause inflation and that ruins the economy. You're gonna make it worse. I was like, maybe I am, and I understand that there's like more of a customary 10% here, but I'm also loud and I don't speak perfect Spanish, and I'm probably gonna tell everyone a joke, some of which the people will like and laugh and get, and other times it will fall flat because my Spanish is not perfect. I still think that that's the ultimate testament to genius, if you can be funny in another language. And I'm always trying things, even here, and sometimes it works, and other times people are like, okay, gringo. And so I'm like, just the tip for putting up with me from my point of view is going to be like 20%, because like everything should be a tip, because like the company's not going to give it to you. Like I can only imagine what people get paid here to work at Starbucks. Starbucks in the States, from years, doesn't pay great. And they're one of the few places that will actually give you like a 401k. But like, does the Mexicano Starbucks offer those same sort of wages? Probably not. Do they offer the Mexicano version of a 401k? Probably not. Am I still going to make the same kind of remarks here as I would in California California or wherever, probably. Well, then you better fucking pay up, you cunt. And that's how it's going to be.
You feel the need to accommodate people for the tolerance of your presence?
All the time, every day, all the time. It's like, wow, that's true about most things. I feel that way about a girl too. The Yanni was here yesterday, my local girlfriend, and I was like, oh, I know she's having some issues with this or that. And I was like, well, I'm the same, and I didn't bathe today, so I'm probably going to give you a little bit more money because I know that you'll just spend it on yourself and be momentarily happy. But really, I'm just buying tolerance, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. So I got another one. I told you I wanted to tell you the mothball thing. It's not something I would ever really say in front of people because it's just not going to land, not going to be used. But I imagine in the sense of like, do you guys remember mothballs? And so I'm going to lose 90% of the audience there. But also in my mind, it's like, how bad of a problem were moths? Like ever? Like in one generation, we went from the potential of having your entire wardrobe just absolutely decimated by moths that you can't see. You never see them, but you go in, you hang up your woolen sweater overnight, and if it doesn't have the plastic around it, you're already asking for it. If you don't have a tin of poison at the base of your closet, then that's your fault. But you come in the morning and like you hear a clutter as you're going into it, and you open it up and the hangers are just kind of moving like this. And you had been warned. You had been warned that moths were there, and you didn't put it in there, and there you are, just looking at every article of clothing that you had, every woolen item gone, like maybe a loose fabric hanging there in a wind that doesn't exist, and you look down, and down you see a moth the size of a fat Labrador. Yeah, tiny little wings, like it can't fly, too big to fly. It's full of an assortment of coats, and then it just slowly, it waddles out the door and coughs up a little bit of wool, and it just leaves, and you're like, I brought this on myself. I brought this on myself.
Because no mothballs.
Yeah, I didn't put the poison on the floor for the dog to get.
That's gold. That's hilarious. I think more people remember mothballs than you realize. And I think that the ones who do will be on the floor and will like incite other people to laugh. That's gold. And I think that you hit on the great travesty of American enterprise, which is that probably 90% of the bullshit that we quote unquote need is sold to us by advertisers. Yeah. The Don Drapers of the world, the Zacharys of the world, who are like, we can create the idea of a need for this, because this is a famous line from Mad Men, is that we're not selling cigarettes, or we're not selling, pantyhose or any kind of product at all. What we're selling is happiness. What we're selling is escape. And in your mind, you're like, yeah, I've seen that moth and he's coming for my shit. And if this is the way out and it's only $5.99 plus tax, go. I'll buy two. Are you having twofers? Let's buy one and get another one for free.
And guess what? Put that thing in your closet, and here's the trade-off. Clothing moth-free. You're going to smell like poison forever. Anyone that you go by, you're like, boy, I'm cold. What's this smell? Is it Vicks Vapo Rub? Is it stale DMT? Like, no, I'm covered head to toe in mesothelioma, and I have to cover myself in poison in order to keep my wardrobe from being consumed by biblical swarms of never before seen moths.
Okay. So I got one just like that. So you see my hair on the side. It looks like, when you're looking straight out of my face, it looks all gray. But then when you look at it on the sides, it's kind of the wings, like that mafia guy, Paulie Walnuts. It's just like on the wings. Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm only 40. I'm kind of stressed out all the time because of the business. I know I have gray hair. I smoke. It's a nicotine issue and it's a stress issue. You put those two things together, you're a little bit gray. And of course, because like the Facebook algorithm is so adept at knowing like what you want or what you might want, right, that they position a thing. And the ad that I got was, which of these shampoos is the best at removing gray hair? And I was like, okay, I'll buy that. Let's have a look. So I went on the thing, and it's like a top 5 list. And obviously it's sponsored content, meaning it's not really an editorial. It's some marketing content really smart and knows exactly how to do the right messaging to bait people in their segmented audience, i.e. me, exactly how to click and to look at their thing. And so I bought the thing. It's called Mane, M-A-N-E, like a horse mane. And it's like a puck, and it's like black and gray. And you're supposed to like scratch at your shit. And if you scratch at your shit in like a few weeks, it's not gray anymore. And I bought it. It cost $25. And I went through the whole thing. and I'm looking at myself. I'm like, it's still kind of there. And this is how advertising works. I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy 2 next time. I didn't buy enough, and obviously it works because it made a top 5 list. And this time I'll go on Amazon and get a deal, but it's 2 that I need and not just the one. And then I will not have gray on the sides.
Yeah. You got dick pills.
Yeah, exactly. Gas station dick pills. Exactly.
Yeah, because anytime, whether it's harder, but usually like anything longer, girthier, like who are you gonna call and say, hey, I need a refund, my shrimp dick has not been addressed. I called, I bought the thing, it was embarrassing, my dick is still like a bay shrimp, like half a peanut, and I feel that I need to be compensated for that at the risk of the entirety of my social reputation. Like, because I can promise you it didn't work, I will send you a dick pic. It won't be hard to get it in frame. It'll be very easy. I'll show you a before and after, and you will see I still have a tiny dick. Like, they found the most perfect market to sell snake oil, man.
Exactly. I think that's like 90% of shit. And there's this like intellectual guy, Noam Chomsky, who talks about manufactured consent, and that the way like we rushed into the war in Iraq, the first one, or the whatever one, the George Bush Jr. one, and a million other things like that are kind of made like that. And, we think, because, we're all just Americans and so individually brilliant in our own way, that's what every American thinks at least, that like, I form my own opinions, where in reality, I'm the perfect example of this. Like, usually I'm a smart guy and usually I think for myself, but even in the process of knowing that I looked at the gray hair shampoo, purchased it, used it, it didn't work. And I can tell you right now that it's December 2nd that we're recording this, and my expected delivery date from Amazon is December 4th to the 5th. I can't wait to get that fucking mane and start using it again on my hair. Even though I know from experience it does not work at all. I'm like, no, we're going to try it again.
Yeah, you didn't use enough. Like, I don't know if you know this, but I've heard it on the TV. They're stubborn grays.
It's just, they're holding out.
Yeah, you're always supposed to tackle those stubborn grays. I heard that on the TV.
Exactly. So like, as much as we may think that we're so clever and so brilliant and so individual in our thinking, get out of here. There's somebody else way upstream who's like, working the little strings and,
Despite our intelligences, there are insecurities that remain that like allow a little bit of optimism through the skepticism that like it's playing to a part of you that has less to do about intelligence and more to do about somewhere between ego and vanity, that like it hits you in a place where intelligence isn't quite the roadblock that you'd think it is.
The big thing on that tip is social proof. So I have to balance my own being gamed by my vanity and ego and stupidity versus what close people who love me and whose opinions I respect and believe. So Alex Feldman, who my French-Canadian ex-wife, Anishka, my assistant, and then my close friends here have all said, oh, no, salt and pepper, you look better with little gray. Because like we both had young faces and I'm embracing getting older. I actually don't mind it. I'm not rushing back to the gym. I'm not saying dumb shit like our father does, like, I'm going to get in the best shape of my life. I'm like, no, I'm going to gradually and slowly degrade and hopefully do it with as much style and grace as possible. But I'm not by any means in the best shape of my life at all, nor am I striving to be there. Because I can balance what I like to believe about myself versus what my friends, like close people whose opinions I care about. Somewhere in the middle is, I think, who we actually are. Because in our own head, oh my God, we're the greatest liars. And it's so easy to believe our own bullshit. And then out here, kind of like what you were saying at your comedy show, where you're like, do I accept this compliment? Am I going to allow this in?
Yeah.
And with certain people, yes, of course. And with other people, I'm like, no, you're an idiot. I actually will do the opposite just on the basis that you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle of all of that is kind of probably who we are.
For sure. All right. I got another one for you. This is more of a story that leads to a dichotomy of people. That being that there are loogie people and non-loogie people. So I was in a gym and I was in the sauna and there was just one other guy in there and he was a little bit strange. And I can just see this dude is fucking tilted. Like he's upset about something. He's kind of pacing in there and he's looking out the door. I have my headphones in, but like low volume so I can hear the absolute absurdity coming out of his mouth, and he's furious that he works there, and he's furious that people can't put their weights away and they keep leaving this here and that here, and people are so disrespectful and people are so obnoxious. He just can't believe people would act that way. And I'm just like, that's all crazy. And then I hear him and he just goes and like he's summoning up a phlegm from a place that's somewhere in between like near his anus or in the back of his brain, and like it's multiple attempts to pull out just a vile poison from within him. And I'm like, all right, now I'm really listening. Like, that doesn't sound like a swallower here. Like, what? What? Yeah, all right, people are wild, but you're slipping into that category, man. What are we doing? And so we're in an enclosed space, and he sucks that up and he goes, and he spits it on the ground in the sauna where we're all getting healthier. And I'm like, we just fucking live in this world where just we take everything that's within us that's vitriolic and poisonous and we go, you're all that. And then you hawk the fucking biggest loogie that man has ever seen, and you spit it on the floor where I don't even think there's a drain in there. And you talk about how people can be so goddamn irresponsible and disgusting. I'm just like, I'm in a simulation. For sure I am. I'm being tested at every corner and every opportunity. I'm in the middle of just some snake eating its tail sort of experience. And I'm just like, oh, look at us go. We're people. We're doing it. And so I noticed when I told people that story, that just as I start to hawk something up, that there are people that are so fucking disgusted by the idea of hawking up phlegm and spitting it out, and some people see it as no problem whatsoever, that there's loogie people and there's not non-loogie people, and some people be hawking and some people ain't be hawking.
Okay, that's really good, and that's a good like situational thing. That's almost like a King of the Hill, or I can't remember who that cartoonist was, the spicy keychain guy, but like those situational things, it's just like a great situational vignette. Kevin Smith, before he got kind of more mainstream, used to be really good at that. What was that line? I think it's from Clerks. Yeah, Clerks. It's important to have a job these days that makes a difference, boys. That's why I manually masturbate caged animals for artificial insemination. Just having a normal conversation and somebody hits you with something like this, you're like, what? I love like situational things like that. Terry Zwigoff made a movie like 20 years ago called Ghost World. Did you ever see Ghost World? Mm-hmm. So it's Steve Buscemi and like Thora Birch, who would have been fresh off of American Beauty, which was like her peak, and she kind of went away. And young Scarlett Johansson, who was like super young and great. It was full of little nuggets like that, little hawked loogies, so to speak. And I highly recommend that one. That's one like, it's kind of, there's a lot of deadpan where you're just like, somebody will say something horrible and you're just like, wow. Or somebody will do something casually horrible and then it largely goes unnoticed. But then the Steve Buscemi character, he's like a music buff. He only listens to like old jazz. He's very much like an old soul. And he's forced to be in a car and listen to the radio. And he's like raging at the girls in the car about how like loud and mean and hateful the guy's voice is. And I was like, you know, I never really thought about that. Radio people are kind of horrible and loud and hateful, and that's really good. So I don't know. I like things like that because like there are terrible things that occur on a regular basis, and because they happen in the context of like societal norms, like you're just like, oh, that's just fine. And it's only when somebody has like a slightly different point of view, usually because they're immature, kind of like we are, and they'll be like, no, that's insane. And all of you people are even crazier for permitting this sort of thing. I can't believe that person in particular, but all of you at the same time. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. All right. So on those social norms things, when I used to walk the big groups of dogs, I got so fed up with people trying to interject or intervene on what we were doing by petting the dogs and always saying, like the same 9 phrases became hashtags I used 10 years ago, where it's like, are they all yours? You're like the dog whisperer. How do you keep them from fighting? How do you clean up the poop? People kept saying the same shit. It became so redundant and just asinine that I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And I got to a point where no matter what anybody said, I ignored them. I would not acknowledge anybody say anything ever because they're riling up the dogs. They are acting like fucking toddlers. They're acting like toddlers trying to, like, I need to pet the dog. If I don't pet the dog, my day is going to be ruined, etc. And when fucking AirPods became a thing, it changed the fucking game on ignoring people. Like, it was absolutely incredible. While I was on a walk and I knew nobody was around, I might play the music just kind of gently, but I needed to be tuned in with the dogs, and that's through sound too. But if I put those in when people were around, I could get away with ignoring them in a way where I would hear everything they said. It was the same shit they ever did, and they'd be like, oh, he's just probably listening to classical music and he's got his headphones in and he didn't hear us. And I'm like, Oh my God, my savior. These headphones have got me out of the muck, and now I don't have to look. I had sunglasses on. I don't have to look at them. I don't have to listen to them. I don't have to respond to them. And they're like, bless his heart. Bless his heart, the way he didn't even acknowledge us, because he's just so in tune with the creatures, and the headphones change the game on ignoring people, and I fucking loved it.
So I'm the opposite, right? I talk to people all the time. That's how I met my ex-wife, Alex Feldman. We were just walking through the airport. I'm just like chatting with people because I chat with everybody everywhere. But in our business, because the girls are so like next level beautiful, they have embraced similar tactics.
Yeah,
so Helen, who was the first Sure Thing model, who was like half Swedish and half Black French, and like her boobs are all natural, as big as her head. She's unbelievably gorgeous, and she never drives, so she always takes an Uber. And I promise you, it's the same idiotic 9 questions, but like the questions for the 19-year-old extraordinarily hot girl who's like, you know, has an unbelievable history and is like even just to see her, you're like, wow, her old boyfriend would like take it as a personal offense that like guys would walk up and try to talk to her and like totally ignore him. He's like, what am I, an idiot or whatever? And I was like, no, men are just animals, and heaven is just unbelievably beautiful. Yeah. So I would always text her when she was leaving like a photo shoot. I was like, okay, you did a good job. Are you happy with the photo? She's like, yeah, some, whatever. And I was like, can I call you an Uber? She's like, of course. And I was like, do you have your AirPods? And she's like, oh yeah, no problem. And so she do the same thing, but she's in the back seat, and like the guy's like, you know, he could be from any generic ethnic background, it doesn't matter, but he'll like gussy himself up and like adjust the mirror and be like, eyes going, and Heaven's like, AirPods.
Beautiful women live in a world that people just can't understand. I like the cat with the hot dogs meme from years ago, like what it's like to be any gal at a gym, and it's just fucking a cat on a pile of hot dogs and hot dogs flying in every direction. That's got to just be, I just can't imagine what that would be like. But in a less sexual, well, in a not sexual way, the level of attention that the dogs got definitely demanded a different standard of behavior while I was out that in Sonoma. I had to balance with not being too much of a dick because it's a small town, but it was just boundary after no, after no, after absolutely not. Can you do that? Can't do it. No, ignore, just all the time. And that actually got kind of fun.
So I've long made the point that you and I, because we're so similar with like very slight but distinguishable differences, that your kind of experience with the dogs and my kind of experience with all these models is very, very similar, to the point where people are like, they always assume all these really kind of gross basic things. Like the most basic thing is like, oh, well, he must be either abusing or taking advantage, or like I'm just like betting all the girls and can barely pull myself out of bed long enough to send an email or return a text. Like that must be all happening. I was like, no, it's the opposite, really. It's just business, and mostly we're friends at best, right? And sometimes not. But like, you can keep thinking whatever you want. And so my one attorney in New York, Matt, he always says this, he goes, say less, because you and I are both so verbal. And I'm like, yeah, I will engage sometimes with like a ridiculous kind of like roundabout circular logic explanation of just about anything in the business. And I was like, I don't need to tell these people anything. They let them think whatever they want. I don't care. I'm like, yeah, you know what? You just interrupted an orgy. I really need to get back to that. And I'll field your question later. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've got a full evening of human trafficking, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Of course, that's exactly what it's like. Yeah, the reality behind the scenes is anything but, and I don't want to delve too far into all that because it's like famous people. Whereas you could talk about the dogs and probably they're not going to mind that much. But some of the people in our business are a little touchy about all that. But like, yeah, it's all orgy / trafficking pretty much all the time. And I kind of have to get going even right now.
Yeah, it's gridlock on my human freeway. Like they are moving full to the brim in both directions, and there's not enough caffeine in the world to get me through this. And so let the traffic king get back to his freeway of infinitely abused teenagers. Thank you.
That's perfect. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's funny. The one distinct difference I would imagine, because my game is largely human, is that you probably haven't had to deal with too. I mean, there probably are some like quirky animal people in your world, But like, I can distinctly say I've had no fewer than 3 legitimate, like, cause for slight concern, even though I'm like tall and kind of stupidly fearless. There have been 3 incidences of actual death threats. And I'm just like, okay, you want to kill me? Okay, there's a line. It's not the longest line, but it started a little while ago. You should probably just get in line and we'll be with you eventually. Even the FBI, we've talked to the FBI about some of the problems with this. They're like, yeah, this doesn't really meet the nexus of what we're looking for. I was like, oh, nexus. That's a big word. Oh, I see. Okay, well, I'm just going to deal with the death threats and other insanity on my own, and you guys keep doing nothing for me. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
You remember talking about the tracking sperm whales for the finding of ambergris in order to become whale vomit millionaires?
You mean the next business I'm going to start after I get out of the modeling business? Of course I remember that. I've got some decent notes and like a half-assed plan. Let's talk, bro.
All right, so that led into chasing sunken treasure and following maps of downed Spanish galleons in order to plunder their gold. So remember those conversations?
Of course. There's a galleon off the coast of Colombia that's supposedly going to cost billions of dollars to get to. However, contains tens of billions of dollars of like doubloons or cougarans or whatever. I think about this stuff all the time because it's adventurous and interesting and like I don't have to like sit at a desk all day.
Well, then you're really going to appreciate this. So imagine if money weren't what you were after and your kink was pissing and being pissed on, that you're now following the movement of jellyfish. And so now you're following around the movement of shore-based jellies, and then you go to these jellies and you just are waiting for somebody to get stung, and then you just happen to be the guy. You're just there, or no, you're going out into there and you're like, oh my God, I've been stung. Anybody want to solve my problem? Oh, I've been covered about the legs and chest and general neck area with box jellies. Is there anyone here who would find it in their beautifully disgusting heart to cover me in piss, and that you could just follow them around and you could get away with both pissing on and getting pissed on by people indefinitely? I mean, if money's not your goal, I'm not kink shaming anyone. Quite the opposite. I'm giving them an opportunity that if that's what you love, follow the jellyfish, and you've gotten away with everything. People will drop trow right on the beach and piss on you in front of their children, and you're like, I didn't realize it. Now I need children to be a part of that. Thank you for the upgrade.
That's cool. That's beautiful.
In fact, I want your children to watch. When you're done pissing on me, I need them to piss on me too. Yeah. It really, children piss really takes the edge off of this jellyfish thing.
It's gold. That's pure gold. Yeah, that's one of those situational jokes, like a kind of like a Quagmire on Family Guy. Like he would discover a new kink and he'd be like, so pretty lady, I just got myself a little bit of jelly thing here, and he was just like line up.
Always fucking thinking about a new way to fucking get yours. All right, so are you eating much sweets these days?
Sure. Yeah, I don't take care of myself, and I always joke with my friends that I'm working on maintaining the family tradition of adult onset diabetes. So I want to be able to say diabetes in a non-ironic way one day.
I got a bit on Girl Scout cookies that I'm always trying to balance my love and need of cookies with not liking to be pestered by petulant children. And they're like, I'm going into a coffee shop and it's like, do I want cookies? Always. Do I want to be interrupted unnecessarily to be peddled product by like Karen-esque mothers perpetuating that onto their children? And I'm walking into a coffee shop and I'm like, there's nothing that I would want more than a box of fucking caramel cowboys and fucking chocolate delights and fucking cinnamon cookie babkas. And yet these confident 7-year-olds come out in these horrible costumes and they've got every line nailed, and I'm just like, I just can't I have no interest in interacting with you. I don't like to be pestered for product. If I want a product, I'll go to it. And I'm in there, and by the time I come out, I'm like, that cookie hankering is really superseding the not liking to be bothered, and I'm leaving with a pile of cookies. But that like I have to face that every time, that of course I want cookies, and I fucking despise being pestered, especially by children. Like, I don't like your entrepreneurial spirit. Like, you're too young for that. Settle down with that. I see your mom in the back going, say it, use the line we used, and I'm like, I'll make you a deal. If you don't say another word, 6 buckets of coconut cowboys and I'm in.
That's great. Oh, that's cool.
I
So
hate it.
here it's the exact same thing and it's even worse. So the kid is like 4 or 5 and you're like, wow, it's 11 o'clock at night and you're approaching a whole table full of drunken, like half gringos, half Mexicanos to sell cigarettes or vape juice or like a pan dulce, like a sweetbreads or like a little local treat of some kind. But I'm like, it's really late. And then we'll talk to somebody who's like in the know here, like our friend Jimena. And she's like, they give all those money to the narcos. I was like, oh, and the atrocities continue. Not only am I being pestered by said child, but they're way younger than the States. And somehow the money that we're giving them, God only knows how the actual transfer occurs, is going back to drug pushing cartel members. How wonderful. Let's just engage in this. And they'll like sit at your table, they'll come right up to your shit and they'll be like, like, wow, there's no right move here. I could say yes, and I'm paying narcos, or I could say no, and I've broken the heart of a 4-year-old who like just learned how to walk.
Were you there when we were coming across the border from Tijuana into San Diego and a one-legged, prepubescent child on crutches approached the vehicle and the window was open this much, and rather than asking or giving her pitch on it, just started stuffing chiclets into the window? Like, past asking, there's a language barrier. If I put this in here, then at that time I know there's $2 American coming your way, and like I'm in the back seat, the window's tinted, can't probably tell who's back there, and I'm like 9 and I'm like, oh my God, this child is no older than me. One leg stapled shut on an old Wrangler jean, just jamming terrible candies in through the window in hopes of my allowance money that I make in a week of doing chores. And it was absolutely fucking devastating. Not a week has gone by that I haven't thought about that since 1991.
So I don't know that I remember that exactly, but the borderline going across is terrible. And a lot of why Mexico is kind of depressed has everything to do with we want cheap labor. There are all these assumptions that Americans make about Mexico, and the first thing is that it's lawless and it's dirty, and some of these are true. Like any stereotype, some of them are true and some of them are ridiculous. The biggest export coming out of here is like the people who, like in Guadalajara, which is a huge city, it's about as big as LA, and it's similar culture to LA. Everyone's very like, I don't know, focused on their appearance. I actually really like Guadalajara, but they have all these factories that popped up since like the 40s, and so they've repurposed the factories a bunch of different times because there's this like neighbor just north of Mexico, and boy do they have money. And so in the 40s and 50s it was like machine parts and like welding and other like tools, like tooling for tools, stuff like that. And then of course over time Americans had this need, like this lust if you will, for computers. And so in the 90s all the big computer manufacturers started sending the parts that they would have manufactured elsewhere to Mexico to assemble and then ship back. And like the biggest thing that I've noticed is like, oh my God, I can't believe this is all just because we want to have cheap shit. And Mexico, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I look at it as like kind of new China, because China does the exact same thing. They make all this cheap shit. They just kind of want to get rid of it. And it's the same thing that happens here. So of course, in a non-sophisticated, basically you and the road kind of way, the thing that they could get across is the chicle gum. And there are a million things like that. But at the end of the day, the hustle for Mexico into the US is not that different. It's just like technology things. It's the same basic thing. It's ridiculous.
They're just repurposing the husk of a building to fit into whatever cheap infrastructure or cheap manufacturing can be addressed for the given age.
Sure, exactly. And what kills me is how much nicer and polite and generally, like it's in the culture, this whole thing about respect. We've talked about, our family, the Latino side of our family, that they're kind of very like proper and formal about things. And, of course, from film and TV, it's all like the movie Traffic or like Breaking Bad, where as soon as you cross the border, there's a sepia filter that goes over everything. And every other person is like either a narco with a machine gun or like a child prostitute.
I've seen the internet. That's exactly what happened there.
So it's the opposite. And people are like, they have all these assumptions why I moved down here. I was like, I just like being nice to people. I like when I go to get my food delivery from Rappi, that every single time I'm going to get a muchas gracias and a de nada or some version of that. And then learning like the little subtleties of that, and knowing that like the experience out in the world, although like any big city, it's a little crazy and like, kind of like dirty or like insane, that there of course are people who are going to beg for whatever, like any big city in the world. But like by and large, people are just nice. And I'm like, oh, well, of course there are states just like in the United States that are terrible, but like by and large, I'm like, no, people are just kind of nice and have good manners. And when people ask me, they're like, oh man, you're in Mexico? I hear it's getting really bad there. I was like, oh yeah, it is. And it's not for you. You should probably just not even come down here or even think about it. It's not for you. I'm sorry, it is. And I'm right in the middle of it, and it's not for you.
Do you have blue sky there, or is it just like a dingy haze of brake dust and low-grade poison and emissions from 70s Cadillacs?
Exactly. So what's funny is that like I'll get up on my high horse once in a while about how it's really cool. Like I live in a nice part of Mexico City, and then we went to an area called Santa Maria la Ribera last year. My friends Brandon and Jimena for my birthday, and we ate some food at like a place called Pelicano, and they have like a cooker or a smoker or something where the meat stays in a thing, and it's supposedly like smoke and things that are like make the flavors come out, and it's really great. And I remember last year, or I guess it's this year, but like my last birthday, where all of my friends here were all going to go to this place called Casa Franca, and I was like, okay, I had something weird last night. It's not quite sitting with me very well, and I get up on this high horse. Oh, it's so great, and everybody's so nice. And then I ate it, and then Jimena, my friend down here, also ate the same thing. And I texted them at the last minute. I was like, I can't go. And Brandon, her boyfriend, the next day told me, he's like, yeah, Jimena said, take me to the hospital. And I was like, yeah, I actually slept for 14 hours, and I don't know what the fuck was in that food, but good Lord, I almost died.
Yeah.
As much as like, I'm like, oh, Mexico, it's so divine and dignified and sophisticated. But then once in a while, you'll eat something that will damn near kill you.
Well, the pig, I don't know, or whatever kind of animal was on there probably drank the water. Don't drink the water.